Hello everyone. Apologies for my small absence from YouTube. Just had my hands full with a bunch of stuff, including an unboxing that's going to happen tomorrow with all the gifts people have been sending me to the PO box. Today I will be featuring the Belfast 43, and the matchmaking, as you can see, is pretty damn brutal. It is tier 10. Starting off, the enemy has a carrier, and that's probably something we can start off with, and that is the AA. Whereas the Belfast, the original tier 7 Belfast, has pretty good AA for its tier. Belfast 43 has possibly I would say probably some of the worst AA you can have at tier 8 among any cruisers. I would say we're talking Mogami levels of AA. Don't expect you to defend yourself against any carrier whatsoever. I would say probably tier 6 carriers can even strike you. It makes sense, I guess, from a historical point of view that the tier 7 Belfast, that's the more modernized version, has better AA. But from a gameplay perspective, having worse AA at the tier higher isn't exactly an enjoyable experience. The AA is just straight up trash, so, well, kind of like most AA in the game, but like really extra trash. You're not going to be able to defend yourself at all in this thing. The turret traverse, as you can probably see, is kind of surprisingly painfully sluggish for a supposed light cruiser. The original Belfast tier 7 is of course known for being quite overpowered. Power creep has tuned it down a bit, they haven't actually nerfed it. So the obvious worry was that the Belfast 43 would be the same, and I can already tell you, you don't need to worry about that. This thing takes a series of trades which are all honestly rather poor. We can start off with the Torpedoes. It's able to single, it has 3 torpedoes on each side, 8 km range, it can single launch them and it can launch them 3 at a time, but honestly these are desperation tools. The angles are okay, but if you're forced to use them it's because you're already in trouble. So generally speaking, their biggest value to me is when I radar a DD, if I figure out if he's reversing, going to accelerate, whatever, I basically use the torpedo prediction indicator to help me line up shots. You get an example of the amazing AA DPM here, or well, DPS. Not exactly very impressive. So you get torpedoes, but you trade a fair bit to get them, and honestly they're not very valuable at all. You still have pretty garbage tier armor, which means that you have, was it 16mm nose, and then you have a 90mm upper belt. So 16mm means of course you can bounce 203mm, but calibers larger than that, 230 is at 234 and so forth, they can overmatch your nose. So if you run into the likes of Drake or Henry or whatever, they can easily AP overmatch you just like they can against other light Royal Navy cruisers. The benefit that you have in your HE is that instead of having 25mm pen like the Belfast has, you have 30mm of pen. And you have a base fire chance, I think it was 9%. It is so disgustingly bad. Well, it is just very underwhelming. Your fire per minute is, I would say once again, probably some of the worst. In fact, heavy cruisers start more fires per minute than you do, and you only have 30mm of pen, and you absolutely can't really afford to spec IFHE. It's not even that good to spec IFHE anymore because of how much more 50mm plating they've added to the game and how many more IFHE resistant ships they've added to the game. So, and you really don't want to butcher your fire chance any more than it already is butchered, because you already struggle to start any fires whatsoever. As you can probably see here, we have we're already racking up something close to 50 hits, and yeah, there's no hint of a fire, and this is without IFHE. They have changed around some things with the guns besides just giving you slightly more pen. Namely, they have been so afraid that they're going to create another overpowered Belfast that they've nerfed the reload. And they nerfed it significantly. They gave the guns a bit more HE alpha and they gave them a bit more pen, but they nerfed the reload to 10.5 seconds. Now, light shells, as you can see, the travel time is honestly quite brutal when you're trying to target any ships. This ship is, what, 14 kilometers away, and you can see the shell travel time is 10 seconds, and it's already starting to get quite difficult to land any shells on him. The reload is 10.5 seconds. I think Mogami has a 10-second reload. So just to put it into perspective. Whereas the Belfast had a very respectable HE DPM at its tier. I think it broke 200,000 HE DPM, which meant that it was actually quite competitive. No, so yeah, it actually had a 201 HE DPM, which meant that it had slightly better than Shores and Boys and these. Not as much as Helena, but I mean very competitive for tier 7, and it combined with the smoke, it just made it so very powerful for its tier. This new version of the Belfast, on the other hand, with that 10.5 second reload, only has 168,000 HE DPM. And I mean, it's terrible. at tier 8, losing that much HE DPM, it's just terrible. Even Ochakov beats it. Ochakov has something like 173,000 HE DPM. So you're actually losing to a cruiser that I consider probably one of the lowest threats in the game. So in terms of damage output, this thing is basically a meme. It is probably one of the least scary tier 8 cruisers that could possibly be spamming you. That doesn't mean that it doesn't have some advantages. I mean, it's still brutally good at killing DDs like the tier 7 Belfast. In fact, you have that same concealment, 8.9, but you have access to 9 km radar, unlike Belfast 8.5. It's a 25-second radar, so it does let you get a few volleys off, and of course, stealth radar allows you to catch a lot of DDs off guard and pick up a lot of kills on them. That's what the Belfast does really well, but I mean, I don't know, do we need another ship that's really good at killing DDs? I'm not really sure about that. And the trade-offs this ship makes are questionable. I just popped that smoke, well, I'm already forced to leave it. You have kind of the built-in acceleration mod in the Belfast, but even then the ship is a rather clumsy one, especially when it comes to stopping. And unlike the old Belfast that could have sat in that smoke and farmed them for a very long time, you have these short burst smokes, which are once again Wargaming's attempt to stop the Belfast phenomenon happening again, which is a Belfast just sitting in a smoke and farming people to death. So you're basically forced to leapfrog between your smokes continually to avoid being blapped. So, next smoke is up, I pop the next smoke, and we go back to farming again. Your smoke farming penalty I think is something like 5.3, so you are very good at sitting in your smoke and farming. Add in the Hydro is slightly better than the original Belfast, it's 5 km Hydro versus 3 km Hydro. But even then, this is once again just a poor trade-off. In a light cruiser, you don't have enough of these smokes to compensate for the lack of smoke power. For the amount of smoke power that you're giving up. You simply, with the low fire chance in the ship, you simply don't have enough time to actually do meaningful damage during these smokes. That Bismarck, he ate the torpedo, he ate the flooding, he damage gunned it, and now I'm desperately trying to get a fire on him. That's the same tier battleship as I am, so the fire resistance coefficient isn't that high, and this is just how bad this ship is at punishing targets. He gets spotted again, my smoke has run out. I'm trying desperately to use this DPM to get a kill on him, and now he's popped his heel. So there's no chance of me actually securing this kill. The ship feels anemic. The damage output is just so anemic in the ship. Add in the range and the poor shell travel time, and you just struggle to do any damage. Unlike the old Belfast that was very punishing to basically all ships, this new Belfast is only really punishing towards destroyers. Anything else deals with it rather easily. In fact, the battleship can just straight up rush this thing, and yeah, I mean, yes, you have the torpedoes, but the smoke is going to run out so very, very quickly. I just popped the smoke, and as you can see, what, 30, 36, 34, 33, and so forth. The smoke timer is already ticking out. And you run out of the smokes very, very quickly if you're trying to continually use them. Once the smokes run out and you're forced to open water gunboat, you are terrifyingly squishy. You are such an easy target to kill. This is no longer tier 7 either, this is tier 8, which means the matchmaking gets so much more radar focused. Something that I feel people don't really highlight enough, the leap from tier 7 to tier 8 is huge, simply because at tier 7, the only radars people have access to are tech tree radars. At tier 8, every single radar line gets their radars. Chapayev, Baltimore. They all start getting their radars. and we're talking 12 km radars, we're talking 10 km radars. Suddenly everyone has their radars, and you're in huge trouble. Cleveland gets his radar. It just starts piling up, and there's a bunch of premiums with radars at tier 8 as well. And of course, if you get matched up into tier 10 as I am here, well then you got the likes of the Moskva on that flank. There's absolutely nothing I can do to deal with him. And you're just forced to play so much more defensive. The fast-acting smoke allows you to kind of move away from the radar quite easily. Well, not easily, but allows you to maintain distance. But especially 12 km radar is extremely brutal. Because generally speaking, you want to smoke up kind of within 12 kilometers because of your poor shell velocity, and smoking up when someone is 13-14 kilometers away and he just turns away and runs off is extremely frustrating. So the current Belfast is, I would say, honestly quite terrible. It is only really good against destroyers. I do not recommend this ship. There have been some really nice premiums released lately that I would recommend much more highly. For example, Mines. Mines is just, I think, borderline overpowered. It has huge DPM, great damage output, great shell velocity, and just so much more utility than this thing has. Alternatively, if you just want to play a radar ship and you want a stealth radar, play the Baltimore. The Baltimore is brutally good, and it's got super heavy AP as well and better armor, and basically a lot more going for it than this one. This game is starting to be quite lost, so I'm going to try to see if I can demonstrate the AP DPM for you guys. Once again, light cruisers do very good AP DPM if they can shoot unsaturated parts. I'm aiming for the upper belt and the superstructure, and then I switch to the nose, because the nose, as you can see, it's not darkened, which means it's not saturated, which means I can deal those huge volleys on this guy and hopefully kill him off before he has the time to delete me. He does go down, but it's probably quite too little too late. Yoshino, once again, you do have to have last stand on the ship. Your engine brakes, your rudder brakes, everything kind of breaks on this thing. It is very much a light cruiser. IFHE can absolutely blap you as well. Hoping to get some damage in, but Parzival, as I mentioned, he's just going to disengage, and I can chase him with all those ships on the enemy team there. If I try to chase him, I'll just get killed. Add in the crossfire that's coming from the other way. I am about to lose vision, so I decide to smoke up just to make sure that these planes don't get the easiest possible drop. Here you see one of the issues. Even though this ship has a built-in acceleration mod, I'm going to reverse to dodge the torpedoes, because I expect he will drop where he's seen them, and I already see torps coming in. I've already started accelerating now. I'm already full speed forward. This is how early you have to start. You can see my speed is slowly accelerating. This is how early you have to start accelerating to change reverse direction in the ship. And I still just barely dodge these torpedoes. So extremely clumsy even with the built-in acceleration. And well, the smoke I just popped, well, it's already running out, and I can't even slow down in time to try to stay in the smoke. So we drop our kind of desperate 8 km torpedoes, and then we just start accelerating out of the smoke while trying to deal as much damage as possible. You get another demonstration of the incredibly anemic AA as always. Carrier comes in for a strike, I've reinforced the sector, and well, we still didn't shoot down any planes. He just flew past me. Only when he recalled did we shoot down one plane, and that's a tier 8. If a tier 10 strikes you, it's even worse than that. I've already ran out of smokes, and honestly I wasn't even using them every cooldown, but I already ran out of smokes with, what, 6-7 minutes left in the game. Didn't get to use radars as much as I would have hoped, and now I'm just trying to dodge and survive under this crossfire. But even when you angle against BBs, if they're close enough to just hit you, they basically citadel you. That's the way the ship works. In fact, I see the NC is lining up for a shot. Trying to get some shots in, as many as possible, before the carrier kills me. There's the shot. I turn away to angle. In fact, you can see that I'm angled extremely well, and he just punches straight into my citadel regardless, because angling and open water gunboating doesn't work in the ship, because it's also very slow. So it's entirely reliant on those smokes, and when they run out, well, you're kind of target practice. The game ends 155,000, which in terms of damage output for this Belfast 43, I consider a pretty good game. In most other tier 8 cruisers, I would consider this a terrible game to demonstrate the ship's performance in. But for the Belfast, it kind of feels like as good as it gets. In fact, 6 fires, woo! Big achievement. I do not like this ship. I do not rate this ship. I think Belfast is good at only one thing, and that's killing DDs. And there are plenty of ships that do that, while at the same time being extremely effective on other aspects as well. They either have good AA, or they're good at killing cruisers, or they're good at BBs, or they're good at killing everything. Belfast is very, very niche. Wargaming seemed very afraid of repeating the mistake of the old Belfast, so we got a heavily nerfed Tier 8 Belfast in a much worse matchmaking against much more radars. There is absolutely no reason to get this ship. Not recommended by any means. Not recommended at all. Team score wise, I did top the scoreboard, which in a tier 10 matchmaking is always a yay, but overall this was still a pretty convincing loss. Some of these games are just steamrolls, and when you're a tier 8 cruiser, especially one without a heal, it's very, very hard to recover at. Detailed report wise, we have, well, 900,000 potential. Damage received, well, the 4 AP shells that I ate was basically all she wrote. That was more than enough to kill me off. I'll see if I can maybe feature some other tier 8, maybe like a Mogami or something, just to give perspective on how much more damage output you can have in other tier 8 cruisers. Even something like a Mogami, which is kind of power crept, doesn't really have AA, but just having good guns makes such a difference in comparison to this one. Let me show you guys my recommended build for the ship. Right, as usual, let me start off with the equipment. Turret and torpedo survival. Radar duration, so you get that a nice 30-second radar. Better dispersion on the guns. Faster rudder shift, because you can't slot acceleration. If I could, I would absolutely use that instead. And finally, of course, a concealment module. Captain build wise, you want priority target, adrenaline rush, superintendent, and concealment expert. I'm actually not even running last stand. I guess I'm relying so heavily on not being hit, but last stand is absolutely a nice thing to run on this. The problem with the ship is that you kind of want a fair few things on it. I'm also running RPF because once again the concealment is less than the radar, so you can push straight into a DD and radar him. I'm also running faster turret traverse because, well, the turret traverse is surprisingly sluggish for a light cruiser. Expert loader, because if you do want to use AP, the reload is kind of painful at 10.5 seconds. And finally, I do want to benefit from Jack of all trades from Andrew Cunningham. It is improved after all, and it does help you leapfrog those smokes quite a bit. I would say this is a good build. You could mix in things like Demo Expert, for example. I'm not sure what you would trade for it. You kind of need Superintendent. I guess you could trade off RPF and potentially get Demo Expert and Preventive Maintenance. That is a possibility. This is the build I've ran. I've tried a couple different builds. I still don't find the Belfast to be that exciting. It seems rather one-dimensional. Flag-wise, fire chance flags, reduction in fire, speed, faster consumables, very important. You do need a speed. I didn't really touch on it too much, but 34.1 with speed flag is kind of the bare minimum, especially when you got the likes of a Georgia charging down on you at 40 knots. It is not a fun experience. Overall, Belfast 43 does not get my recommendation. I think there are far better premiums that you can spend your money on, and if you do have the original Belfast, it is far, far superior to this ship with far nicer matchmaking as well. The AA, as we touched upon, continuous damage basically non-existent. Only the short range does anything, and the flak actually does significantly less damage than the Belfast. In fact, well, I can't be showing it. Trust me, take my word on it. The other Belfast actually does more damage per flak. I'm not sure how that works, but regardless, this ship is absolutely artificially toned down to the point where there is very little reason to run it. If the gunpowder was somewhat decent, maybe, but with this 10% fire chance with flags running and 10.5 second reload and 15.4 km range, the ship feels extremely anemic, especially when you're fighting tier 10s. Anyways, that was all for me. I'll talk to you guys next time.